Rich, look at you sitting in a jacket in on a computer in a place.
Yeah, I know. Inside a structure, inside of a fixed structure.
A fixed structure. You're
It's
not
a grain
snorkeling.
silo in North Carolina, but it is fixed. It's not moving. No wheels on.
Did you know you were going to be? I have a thing here. Did you know you were going to be in a car because you didn't
No,
tell me you were
no,
going.
no. I didn't. You know what? We decided to go back early, and it's sort of like you just we had finished what we came down there to do, which is get my mom's house ready for sale, and it's like we got to get home. We just wanted to get home, and
It
it
was
was a
one
lot.
of those things that you
It
just
was a
had to get
lot.
out of there.
It was a lot. Yeah, yeah.
It-
Everything was settled down, and it was a lot. So we were on the move. That's what I always did. I got feelings I'm uncomfortable with. Got to go. Got to go. Got to get in action. Got to move.
so we didn't talk about, I don't even think we mentioned this last time you were down there because your dad had passed away,
Right.
has passed
Yeah.
away recently.
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry about that. And your mom is doing okay, though?
Yeah. She's doing okay. She's doing all right. Much better. Thank you.
How long
Uh,
were they together?
72 years.
Oh, stop
They
that.
met dancing at this club in Baltimore. A live band. They were danced to the first dance they had was called "Hey Good Looking" by Hank Williams
I
Sr.
love that
That
song.
song, right? And they jitterbug. They've always jitterbugged all through their life, and so they knew each other 6 weeks, and they got married. Basically, it was quite a thing. She was 18, he was 19. When I was born, like 9 months later, she was 19. My dad was 20, and they've been together for 72 years. Now, look, there's no reason they should have made it that long. They had plenty of battles, and they had plenty of drama. And I'm going to write about someday, but there's quite a story. Really, it's the bastard son meets the orphan daughter. I mean, she was raised orphan, and he was a bastard son, and
Really?
yeah, and they just those sort of vibrational things where they just kind of boom, boom, hooked up, and really incredible. They stuck together. My mom held our family together. My mom's incredible. She's incredible, a strong woman. She held the family together against all odds. She was not going to, her family was shattered by her mother's death, and broke apart.
Where did your mother grow up?
The mountains of North Carolina, truly hillbilly. Her dad was a moonshiner and a knife fighter, and a wild man. And when his wife died, he had 8 kids. He had no idea what to do with them. And
Wow.
by then he had been all sorts of things happened. He had no moonshining business, and they were broke. And he lived in a cabin. I mean, I've been in that cabin when I was a kid. Wood burning stove. They had a pump outside and an outhouse. And
Wow.
my mom, when she was young, wore flour sacks dresses when she was at school when she was like 5, 6 years old. So they were poor, and my mom, like a lot of them, they moved to Baltimore for factory jobs during World War II. So her older sister, was 19 and took my mom in when she was 6 and raised her. But my aunt was a wild drunk. She was a wild woman drunk at 19 years old, trying to raise her younger sister when she was completely out of control herself. So it was interesting. I mean, to me, uh, that my mom and dad had that sort of, they stuck it out. My mom would not
Wow.
there were other women, and she would not let them break our family apart.
Wow.
She held the line, and but she was tough. And once they told me a story, they tell stories you get older that never heard. And I said, Mom, she goes, and this is my mom. She goes, when your dad was coming home after you'd been drinking, and that was almost every night when I was growing up. And she goes, if he was humming a song outside when I heard him coming to the door, okay, I can deal with it. But he was singing the words to the song. She goes, there could be trouble.
What?
Now, she didn't explain what trouble could mean. I didn't even know what that meant. She could be trouble. And so one night I'm sitting there. My mom was a reader. She read like crazy, all voracious. So I was reading a book in the living room, and I heard him singing, coming up the step, fumbling with his keys to the door. I went in the kitchen. I got a rolling pin, classic rolling pin, the weapon of housewives for 200 years. And he came through the front door, and she goes, bam, knocked him out with it. She goes, this is my 90-year-old mom telling me, she goes, I wasn't going to have it that night. Whatever it was, she wasn't going to have it that night. And she told that story in front of my dad. And my dad went, I always wondered what happened that night because I always made it up to the bedroom. And I was there in the middle of the floor with my suit on from the day before. Woke up in the morning with my head hurt worse than any hangover I ever had. He never knew what happened. She never told him until that time when she told me the story. Oh my God.
Did she ever explain to you what his
No,
singing?
no, no, no. Because I'm pretty sure I know what it meant. You know what I mean? He was going
There
to.
was another woman if he
He was
was
going to
singing
get want
words.
to, no, I think he was going to want to get busy with her, and she wasn't
Oh,
right. He was like going to want something, and she didn't feel like giving up that night. You know what I mean? So she was like, I'm not going to have it that night. I think that was it.
oh my God, that's hysterical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so, and did your dad ever get sober or did he?
Oh yeah, my dad got sober 3 years after I did. We really my going
Wow.
making a ninth step with him. This is a really true story. So I went and made a ninth step with my dad, and that was tough for me because first of all, he was still drinking, and I had instructions to take him down. I say ninth step. I'm doing all sorts of. I'm kind of breaking the 11th tradition. So we should scratch that, the whole thing. But I did. My dad got sober, and he got sober in 1988, and he stayed sober his entire life.
Wow.
And of course, he got a lot of help. And I have a sobriety chip. I'm doing all kinds of stuff I probably shouldn't be doing, but he it really made a difference. Our whole relationship changed. I got sober and went back and told him I was sorry for all the things that I did with him. And then 3 years later, he came out to LA. And my dad hated to fly, and he flew out to do the same thing to me. He was under
Get
instruction.
out of here.
Right. And when he started, he said, son, when you came back 3 years ago, and I had to take him down the Delaware River to get him out of the house because he was still drinking. He said, when you came back 3 years ago and said you were sorry and listed all the things you were sorry about, and you never said anything that I'd done. But when you left, all I could think about was what I'd done to your mother and your brothers and your sister and you. And it led him to where he knew he had to stop doing what he was doing. And he got help. And he came out to LA and he loved it, man. He came out to, we went down to the ocean. He did the whole thing with me, and our whole relationship changed. You know how it is. It changed. I love my dad so much. I'm getting choked up. I mean, my friends when I was young used to say, your dad is funny, man. Your dad is funny. And I'd go, not to me, he's not. I mean, my dad and I had fist fights. I mean, I was 0-2. I mean, he was an old farmer.
I was 0-2.
I was 0-2. I mean, butt kicking. You get like a teenage guy, and I was like, my first one, I think I was about 17. I thought, I'm a wrestler. I'm playing football. I'm tough. He knocked me down fast, man. It was a quick fight. And then the second one, I was 19, and he was throwing me out of the house anyway. That's how it started. And he threw me through a screen door. I mean, I went right through a screen door outside, and that was it, man. And then he was tough. He was strong. He was he was farm strong. I mean, there are show muscles. Like we used to say this growing up, there's show muscles and there are farm muscles.
Was your father a farmer?
He was farmer when he was young. He was, man. I baled hay with him and my uncle.
So wait, was this in North Carolina?
No, this is New Jersey, Southern Jersey.
I thought you were a Jersey boy. Okay.
My dad talked his father into buying a dairy farm, 160-acre dairy farm. My dad was working on farms when he was 7 years old.
Okay, now wait. Your mother grew up in North Carolina. Where did your dad grow up?
She grew up in North Carolina, and they met in Baltimore. My dad was stationed in the Coast Guard.
But where did your dad grow up?
In South Jersey.
In South Jersey. Yeah. Okay.
So he grew up on a dairy farm, but up until 12, they bought a dairy farm because his father was working at DuPont. DuPont had a huge chemical factory, one of the biggest in the world at that time, at Carney's Point on the Delaware River, right across from Wilmington, Delaware. And his father was working there and was losing weight, suffering from boils, and sick all the time. And working with these chemicals, he couldn't take it. Some men probably have better luck with it than my grandfather did, but he couldn't take it. So my dad talked him into buying a farm, becoming a farmer. And my dad at 12 had been farming for 5 years, virtually working for his Uncle Joe. And so it's almost like a bit, right? And so he taught his father how to farm. My dad knew how to farm at 12. He knew he'd been farming for 5 years at that point, at age 12. So my dad had a work ethic, was really incredible. Really incredible.
I'm posting right now that we're live so that people know how
Yeah,
to find
sure,
us.
sure, sure.
That is absolutely
Yeah. I mean, we used to we grew up on 1 mile south of this factory. We swam in the river 1 mile south of the discharge pipes of the biggest chemical factory in the world. I
I
mean,
can't
every
believe your
summer.
dad lived as long as he did, being exposed to all that stuff.
Well, he wasn't he didn't work at DuPont. He had a business. He had a life insurance agency. He
Well,
didn't.
right, but be living just so close to it,
There
doesn't
are a
that
lot of people who did. Some people didn't. And we have our area. I mean, it's really a super fun site. It really is. We would every summer get boils swimming in that river. We'd get dysentery, open
oh,
sores. We thought that was part of summer fun. We didn't know anything. This is back in the 60s. And so my dad, a lot of these men, there was these men that worked there. These were guys who lived through World War II and the Depression. They wanted jobs, and these were great jobs. And DuPont paid well. And people back then, men would work, and their wife didn't have to work, and they'd raise kids, and they have a house and cars, and you know what I mean. They wanted jobs, and they knew, some of these guys knew that they were shortening their lives by working at DuPont. They were tough guys. They were that generation. You know, you're talking about the men who and women who lived through World War II. You know,
right,
who
and they
won
had
that
to
war,
make a living.
and they had to make a living, and they know what it's like not to be able to work. So they took those jobs. Those guys, I'm sure, were well aware of the risks they were living with every day.
Wow, 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 wow. And
Yeah.
so your dad did that. So and then what did he do later in life?
Well, he when he got out of the Coast Guard, he went back to farming, but he had um, terrible allergies, which is not good for a farmer. So his alcoholic grandfather had an insurance business in his side room of his house, which was right behind a bar. He wrote most of his insurance policies on cocktail napkins at that bar. You know, there was a path. Literally, my dad told me, a path between his back door and that bar, right? Dominic's was the name of the bar, Dominic's, which became a bar. When I was young, it was Tom's Tavern. Then it became it was a town tavern, right? And my dad took over that business. My dad was like young, and he learned. He was like part of that Mad Men generation of advertising.
Right,
He
right.
advertised in our county for insurance, and so he started getting a lot of business. He advertised. He was a personable guy, and he worked hard, and he built up a good business. You know, and then at a time he said, he came along at the right time. This is post. He got that business in 1958. The economy was booming. The country was booming. Pennsville, my town, was booming with this chemical factory, and my dad, he did well. He did well.
So okay, so we started to touch on this. So you went to law school, you graduated law school.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine for those earthbound people what that was like for them, for you to give
Oh
up law
no,
school to go
they had no
into.
concept. Look, he told me later, said, I had no idea how you're going to make a living. I said, Dad, I didn't know how I was going to make a living. I went to New York City. It wasn't like I had this sheet they gave me. They're like, here's your comedy career sheet. And you'll do this, then you make that, you'll do this, you make that much money. There was no, I just said, these guys are doing this up there. I want to go do this. Then they said, hey, there's these Jersey gigs for $55. Yeah, $55. That's half my rent. Yeah, sure. But you didn't know. I didn't tell anybody in New York City that I'd been in law school, because I didn't want anybody to think that I had an option. I didn't want them to think that I had an opportunity to do something else, because back in that era, you had to be all in.
Uh-oh, you're freezing again. Don't wait a minute. We're on a real computer. You can't be freezing, Rich. There you
I
are.
don't know why I'm freezing. I feel nice, but
Um,
there was a dentist
don't you
hanging around
think you
catch
still
risers.
have to be all in though? Don't you think if you want to make
No,
it?
not at all. There are this generation now. There are so many looky-loos. There are so many hobbyists, permanent amateurs. They never intend to make it full time. They don't intend. They're just doing this as a goof, as a hobby. Remember back in our day, there was a heckle. Somebody'd say, "Don't quit your day job." Well, you yelled that to some comic today, the comic's likely to go, "I have no intention of quitting my day job. I got free dental. I'm just doing this for fun." There was no possibility to do it in that level back then, because there was so little opportunity to do it. Stage time was so precious and hard to get. There were a couple
Wait,
of
speaking of hecklers, I remember you told a story about a very famous, well, I won't tell who. You had a heckler story that you told me once. That you were doing a stand-up gig and you were getting heckled by somebody in a good way that was really working for you. Do you know what story I'm
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah. So this is like 92, 93, something like that. I'd done 5 pilots, right? 5 pilots, and none of them, as me as a star, turned into series. So my agent calls me to William Morris' office. He says, Ritch, there's nothing else we can do for you. And he's got a box of all my tapes and 8x10s. And they're firing me. He says, here you are. And he gives me a sheet of gigs. He says, we booked you at all these places. We're not going to charge you commission. It's our parting gift, right? He didn't say that, but that's what it was. Here's your parting gift. And you had to make that walk of shame out of the agency with that box. And you're walking in, all the secretaries, hey, Ritch, good to see you. I'm walking out. They're all like, nobody's looking up. Nobody's looking up.
God.
Oh my God, he's a failure. That's contagious in Hollywood.
So how long had you been with William Morris?
I'd been with him for, let's see, 80. I probably signed him 83, 84 when it was Triad. Then Triad got taken over by William Morris. So this was like 10 years, something like
wow.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I go to the first gig. It's in a new comedy club in Charleston, South Carolina. When I come in, I see it, a hockey ring's right across the street. It's a sports bar with an upstairs room that's going to do comedy. Playing across the street, the Eagles. The Eagles are playing. It's like the second leg of their Hell Freezes Over tour. This is like whatever it was, 93, something, 92, 93. I said, the Eagles are playing there. So I go in a packed room, new club, Charleston, packed room. I get on stage. I start doing this thing. This guy heckles, but good heckling. He heckles. It's kind of funny. I'm funnier. We go back and forth. We have a little tennis.
Wait, this is opening for the Eagles?
No. The Eagles are across the street.
Oh, okay.
It's important later in the story, but right now it's not important. But I go on stage, and this guy in the audience at the comedy club heckles, but it's not combative, not stupid. It's smart. We're playing with each other. All this goes on continually. I'd get a run of comedy. I'd pause. This guy would heckle again. We'd have a lot of fun. He'd pull back. I'd do another riff of material. A whole rhythm. 2-hour show, just killed it. One of the best shows I've ever had. Wow. I come off the stage. I'm like, wow, man. It was almost like he was a part of the team. It really was that consistently for 2 hours. I come off stage and I'm like, wow, man. The manager runs up and he goes, you know who that was heckling you? I said, no. He goes, that was Sean Penn. I go, Sean Penn? The movie guy. Sean, yeah. And he wants to hang out with you. He's in the manager's office. I said, great, let's go. I go in there. He's got a couple of young friends with him. And he's having a good time, he's partying now. This is I'm 7 years into my sobriety, but I'm hanging with him, and I mean we're riffing backstage. He's doing poetry. I'm doing stand-up stories.
Wow.
We're just going back and forth, having a great time. 4 or 5 in the morning, I said, I'm done, man. I got no, I got no chemical aid to keep this going. I'm like done. I'm ready to go back to the hotel. I said, Sean, I gotta go. He said, hey, before you go, I got to say something to you. Now we have a little audience all night. There's people hanging back there. They don't want to hang out with Sean Penn. He pulls me aside. I think he's going to go, you and I need to do a movie together. He says to me, you got to move to Los Angeles, man. I go, I live in Los Angeles. I thought he knew who I was. He thought he just found a funny guy in South Carolina, right?
Wow.
I go, oh man, I'm not getting anywhere. I don't, I've been doing this for 10 years in LA and he doesn't know who I am. So I go back and I'm kind of depressed. I got a kid, and I'm not getting anywhere. And that's when I started writing for Roseanne. A friend of mine said, call everybody and see if you can get a job writing for TV. And I happened to call Roseanne when she just fired a bunch of people, and I got a job the next day. So it really happened. I didn't even write a spec script or anything like that. I just started like a lot of comics she hired. Yeah, a lot of comics that she hired. I went in there and I started just having to learn. First of all, I was just there to help write jokes, punch up material in the script. But, I learned how to write sitcom scripts by working in Roseanne's, a part of that team. Eric Gilliland, who just passed away.
Oh my God, I know.
He was a great guy. The way he treated people, and he was funny. and he took a lot of punches from her. She was very rough back then.
I
And
know a lot of people that she fired,
yeah, but he didn't.
including Snuffy, actually, by the way.
He fired Snuffy too, and he didn't
She
work for her. He didn't even work for her, and she fired him.
Well, he did. He was the composer for a while, and she fired him, and then because he was with Tom in another capacity, and she thought he was favoring Tom, and so she kind of told him to hit the road, and he
Yeah.
um he kind of had a talk with her, and then she hired him back. But
Well, look, I have, I have all sorts of stories from that too. I mean, she's, incredible. Charlie Hill, right? Remember Charlie Hill? He was a Native American Indian comedian, Charlie Hill.
I don't remember Charlie Hill.
Great comic. When Roseanne and Tom had divorced, the second season I was working for them, she married the bodyguard, and she was pregnant in real life with the bodyguard's kid. So they wrote it into the script. She's having another kid, a late life pregnancy with John Goodman. And so there was a script where they wanted, she wanted John Goodman to talk to his newborn son after the baby is delivered, and deliver a little bit of a monologue about what he intends to do this time as a father. Mm-hmm. So she goes, "You got dad issues. You write it." Told me to write it. So I wrote it. So I wrote this, a couple paragraphs, whatever. It was a monologue. And she calls up, is it ready yet? And Alan Steven, who was, Alan, the comedian Alan Steven from the Comedy Store. Alan was a writer on the show there, and he was very tight with Roseanne. And so Alan and I jump on a golf cart, and we go down to her trailer. And I got this piece of paper with the monologue on it. So I go in there. She's excited to I give her the paper, and she starts reading it. Then she stops and she goes, "Well, I don't know what this means." And I could see over her shoulder was. I said, "Well, that is." And she turns to me. All of a sudden, she completely changed. She goes, "You motherfucker." And she starts cursing me out, right in my face, like spittle coming out, just insane anger. All of a sudden, well, I'm like a fight or flight guy. I can't fight her. I'm going to just leave. So I started to move. Alan had hooked belt loop on my pants, had hooked it. I didn't even see it, hooked it. Started to move. I stop. He yanks me, stop. And I look at him. He goes, like, "Don't move. Like, stand there like a buffalo herd's coming around you." And she just screams at me for a minute or so, stops screaming, goes back and reads it, stops reading it, looks up. Now she's all smiling, goes, "This is fantastic. Don't let them change a word." Then she turns to Alan and she goes, "Do we have a script yet for Thanksgiving episodes coming up?" And the holiday episodes on sitcoms are always special. Mm-hmm. Alan goes, "Shydner has an idea." No, I had no idea. We hadn't talked about it, but my mind went Thanksgiving, Indian, Charlie Hill. So I go, "Well, Charlie Hill." She goes, "I love Charlie Hill. You write the script." That meant a lot of money to me. I got my name on that script. I jumped up past a lot of writers who hadn't gotten scripts yet.
Wow.
Script that year. I got my name on that script, and Charlie Hill got to, we got to work with Charlie Hill, and he came in. We had a blast. He told me at one point, he had all these other Native Americans with him and his friends, and Floyd the shaman was there, and it was sort of like a payback because Charlie, when I first came out to L.A., this is how long this story was. So this is 93, 82, 10 years before I first came out to L.A. I worked one of my first one-nighters in L.A., right? You make a couple $100, go out. We're going out to Temecula. And this other comic who booked it, I can't remember his name. Anyway, Neil Jacobs had booked it. And he said, "You're working with Charlie Hill." So we're riding out in the car, Charlie Hill. Now I knew I was an alcoholic before I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I couldn't drink or smoke before a show. And Charlie's smoking weed and on. And so we're going out, and Charlie had credits. He'd already been on a Richard Pryor show. He'd done the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I hadn't done any of that. He said, "Charlie goes, you close. I've seen your act. You have a lot of energy. You close." I said, "No, man, you got the credits." He said, "No, man, you close. It'll be all right." I said, "I just met the guy." I said, "Okay." So we get out to the gig. There are a lot of brown people in the audience in Temecula. It's not my skin tone, right? It's not a white audience. It's very brown people. I found that there are a lot of Native Americans lived out there. Charlie had drawn a lot of people knew he was coming, and that bar was at least half filled with Native Americans, Indians out there. And Charlie killed, smoked them like smoked them. And I'm standing there back going, "This son of a bitch set me up." I called up from Jersey. I go, "He set me up, man. I can't follow this. And I don't know what." I come off. Neil Jacobs goes up there, is fumbling around making announcements. Well, Charlie comes off. He goes over and he says, listen, when you go up there, tell the audience that your grandmother was a Cherokee princess. Now, he doesn't explain it to me. He said, tell him that. For whatever reason, I trusted him. Right? The guy was sincere. I said, I think this will be a good line for me. So I just something instinctive. I just said, I'll do it. I had no choice. I had no other opening. I said that. They broke out laughing. Then I did my regular act and did fine. Afterwards, Charlie explained to me, he says, whenever a white person says they're got Indian blood, they always say they're Cherokee, and they always say they're a Cherokee princess mother. There are no princesses in Cherokee culture. It's like, that's what made it so funny. And I was like, so 10 years later, I get to pay back Charlie for that. And I love Charlie. He was great.
Wow. But how great of Roseanne that she gave you that gig without a spec script or.
You kidding me? Yeah, she did that. There were a lot of writers on that show, the people who either through Tom Arnold or Roseanne at the time came on. There were stand-ups who became good sitcom writers, who became, Bob Nickman, my friend, was on there when I got there. He was already there.
She fired a couple. I'm trying to remember if she fired Kathy Ladman or Sue Kolinsky. She fired somebody that I know. I
can't remember. I know Kathy was there when I was there, and Carrie and Lois Bromfield. There were Alan Steven, Dave Tyree came in later, and that was the famous "Who's Jackie" episode, which became kind of a famous showbiz story. And so yeah, you know that.
I don't know that story.
Okay, so look, we come in. I hadn't watched the show. Maybe I watched one episode of the show. I wasn't like up to speed on the show. I started watching a lot, and they had a lot of tapes there I could watch, and I watched a lot. I had to catch up. I was in nightclubs every night, working. So I didn't know what the show was or the arc of the show or anything. So I had to catch up, watching a lot of episodes, catching up. And Dave Tyree came in. It was the same sort of situation. He didn't know. He just gets hired, comes in, and so he pitched a joke one time in the writers' room. And it might have been Eric or one of the top executives says, Jackie, who was Roseanne's sister in the show, the character Jackie wouldn't say that. And Tyree goes, who's Jackie? Right? And so there was sort of a schism at times, because there were a lot of people like us that Roseanne hired. So the people who were actual writers, who worked their way up through being writers, there was probably a little bit of resentment of us comics who kind of came in stand-ups through Roseanne.
Right.
So they loved that. I mean, they used to tell that story to mock Tyree. But to be fair, he didn't know. He was just being honest. That's Tyree. He was a very honest, straightforward guy. If he didn't know something, he wasn't going to try to BS you. He was just like, who is that? I don't know who that is. But he wasn't being stupid. He was just being guileless, really. And he was actually, I was no better shape than that. I just kept my mouth shut more, But so that became a story, and they wrote about it in Vulture and other things. But Tyree was hilarious. It was fun to work with.
Okay, so speaking of Roseanne, the first time I ever saw Roseanne was on a Rodney Dangerfield special that Sam Kinison also broke on, a young comedian special that Bob Nelson also broke on. And I had been in the Laughter Company with Bob Nelson in the early 80s, and Bob was the only one on that special actually that didn't break out like the rest of them did. But you have a great Sam Kinison story. So let's go back to the Carson thing that you didn't get to tell us on the last show.
Oh,
because I can't remember if you told us how did you tell us how you got Carson? I don't know if you did.
I went to in 1984 during the summer. I knew the Olympics were going to be a problem. I knew it. The LA Olympics. I knew it, but traffic, the way they were setting up and saying you couldn't do this, you couldn't drive this way to that way. I knew the Comedy Store's up on Sunset, even though Melrose Improv was a little bit off that track. I just felt
Rich, how successful were you as a stand-up at that point in your career?
Well, I did. Look, I'd done Merv Griffin's. I had not done a Tonight Show. When I got out there, it was probably Jay Leno who told me, don't bother Jim McCauley. Jim McCauley was the main comedy booker for the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Don't bother him. He'll find you. So that was the best advice I could have gotten, because I didn't. And other comics who did bother him, he kind of ignored them. And some of them, they bugged him so much, he went and saw them. They weren't ready, and he would never look at them again. So I did not, I didn't even I didn't talk to McCauley. I didn't do any, okay. So the summer '84, the LA Olympics are coming. I just go, I'm getting out of LA. I want to go back to New York.
But wait, when you had gotten Merv Griffin's, how did those go for you?
They went great. I was doing fine. I was doing fine. I did Evening at the Improvs, Merv Griffin's. Those were available at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I got I don't know, a dozen Evening at the Improvs or something.
Wow.
Years. But, I kept doing those, and Merv Griffin's, I would do them. I had one Merv Griffin. It got to the point where this is when I became the bump king for a while, right? They bump you, they bring you down. Now I would just drive over to Merv Griffin. This is when I was still drinking. You just drive over it was less than a mile away from my apartment. I'd drive over to Merv Griffin, sit backstage. They'd say you're bumped. I'd go to the bar. He had a full bar with a bartender with a bow tie, whatever you want. Give me a sidecar, give me whatever you want. This guy was old fat. I'd have a couple of drinks and go home. I made $750, whatever. I got bumped time and time again. I got bumped 8 times. I mean, literally almost every day they'd call me up to come back and I'd get bumped. I start thinking this is my job. I start thinking that my job is to go get bumped. And then I forget that I might actually go on the show. So the last time I show up, I go, why not have a drink now? I'm going to get bumped anyway. Why wait? And I start drinking and I'm drinking and I'm drinking. And all of a sudden, right? Les Sinclair comes up to me and goes, you're on tonight. You're going on. And I'm half bagged, man. And I got cocaine in my pocket. So I go, I better fix this up. So I start doing that little, chemical balance thing. Doing coke. And then I go shot at the bar. And I'm like, hurry up, man. I'm ready now. Not now. Oh, I need some more coke. I'm ready now. Oh, but I need another drink. And by the time I get out there, man, I'm like, and the audience is like, and I look at them and you see them, that look their face, which I'd seen before in audiences when you're coked up and they're like, we can't quite understand what you're saying. I already had a fast talking Jersey mush mouth. I was like the South Jersey version of Bobby Slayton. And I had to slow it down. I thought I have a tape of that. And you could see me like react and slow down and try to, but I was just barely holding on. So I'd done those.
Did they say anything to you when you got off?
No, because I pulled it off. Look, as a Merv audience, this is very easy to do. This is very, in fact, that ties into back to this Tonight Show we can get to. We have, so it ties into that. Merv does. So when I go out to New York, Sam Kinison comes with me. Sam goes, I've never been to New York. I've never been to the East Coast. Like, come on, Sam, come with me. So we went out together. And then when we get out there, I found some people to crash with, and he found some people. And
is this before Sam broke? This is before he broke.
This is '84. This is summer of '84.
So this is right before he broke.
Right. So he went to New York, and took him over to Catch, and he killed a Catch. I mean, they love Sam. New York, his attitude, his white hot anger, they loved him, man. So all the clubs there, and I got him working some Jerry Stanley gigs, and he's killing. And then I called up Mark Breslin, who up in Toronto, the Yuck Yucks. I said, you got to have this guy. He goes up there. Mike McDonald, the Canadian comedian, meets him, and it says Sam is doing well back on the East Coast there. So Jim McCulley, when the Olympics started, he can't do anything in the clubs in LA. It was terrible. It's exactly what I thought was going to happen. And he comes to New York to see what's going on. And he sees me at the Improv in New York City. I come off stage, McCulley's standing there. Never talked to him yet. I knew who he was, of course. He walks up to me and says, you're ready to do Tonight Show.
Wow. 2
weeks, you're going to do the Tonight Show. And so we went to a bar and we figured out what material I was going to do. And my wife was with me, right? Now, of course, she was with me because she wanted to do a Tonight Show. Now, she'd already done a Letterman show by now. I had not done a Letterman show.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, we're talking about Carol Leifer. Okay, Go ahead.
So we're sitting in this bar. Macaulay's talking. She's kicking me under the table. She's kicking me under the table. So he goes to the bathroom and she goes, let's go. Let's get out of here. Let's go. I'm like, I'm not quite finished here. He's just, let's get out of here. I go, okay. So he comes back and said, we got to go. We got to go. He said, okay, man, we'll finish this up. We'll work it out. What are you going to do? We leave. We get out. She goes, sitting there all night. He didn't say one word to me about me doing a Tonight Show. This is why it was tough for two comics to be a couple, to be like, it's like, wait a minute, man, this was my turn. It's my turn. But it's tough. We were both ambitious. I get it later, looking back, I was like, when you see these things that, the cracks in the wall, and it was one of the cracks in the wall for us. So
Sure.
I do the Tonight Show. I do the first one, August '84. Goes great. Jim, I come off stage, stand over here. Johnny's going to come by after the show. You'll shake hands, get pictures with him, but you have those pictures. Get pictures with Johnny. Fantastic. Here's a beer. Let's go sit in the dressing room and talk about what a great show you did. Going to give you another one in 2 months or a month and a half, 6 weeks, whatever it was. The next time I do it, and I quit drinking and drugging for a few days before I did that Tonight Show. I knew I had to tighten up. The next time, Sam and I are partying. The material's been approved. The night before, Sam's like, man, your ending it's just kind of like a regular Tonight Show shot, man. You need to, that new bit you got about Jesus talking to the agent? I go, yeah. He said, you got to do that. Sam and I had gone to see this band called Stryper. Kinison, I don't know how I heard about it. It was the first Christian rock band, Stryper. They came out, I remember, in black and yellow. And the lead singer comes out to open his concert. And he goes, Jesus was the first rock and roller. And I thought to myself, you just put the Son of God in showbiz. If Jesus was the first rock and roller, he must have had tour jackets, Jesus World Tour 1 BC. Right? Jesus had roadies. Come on, we got to get the wine jugs over to Galilee by tomorrow morning. We got a big show, And I thought Jesus must have had an agent. Jesus talking to his agent. You got to get me out of the hills and valleys. I'm dying out there. Being in the temple, that's where the big money is. Jesus, you young kids, you have a very short memory. Do you remember I booked you into the temple last year on Open Messiah night? What do? You walk in, you knock over the money changer's table. I can't get your book back in there. Forget about it. Go out and like Moses, spend 40 years in the desert, work up an act, something big. Tablets, that's huge. The tablets, he had the tablets. That people remember the tablets. He's like, all right, nail me to a cross. You got something there. That's a closer. So that's good. That's doing good in the clubs, right? Especially LA or New York. I go the next day to the Tonight Show. The set is set. It's like you've established what you're going to do. Jim McCauley comes in the dressing room. I'm half in the bag. I'm like, Jim, I got to do this other bit, man. What other bit? And I start doing this Jesus thing. He says, you can't do Jesus talking to an agent on the Tonight. No, that's not going to happen. So then I just back up. I harangued him and let me doing the bits about. I remember that guy. I think his name was Barney. I can't remember, Clark or something. He's the first artificial heart transplant recipient. Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
So they said he was hooked up to this 800-pound machine. They said it's going to affect his lifestyle. I go, it's going to affect his bowling, that's for sure. He's going to have 4 buddies push this machine down the lane with him. Come on, guys, hurry up, come on, right? And it closes with me talking about guys having heart attacks and defibrillator paddles, right? How they go, everybody backs away. I mean, and the body jumps off the clear, and the body jumps. There's some doctor going, turn it up. Let's see how high we can get him to bounce, right? So I talked McCauley and let me do that material. And Johnny hated it, absolutely hated it. He was 4-pack a day smoker. His fear was a heart attack. So, he hated it. So I come off stage, McCauley grabs me and hustles me in my dressing room, hands me a beer and says, don't come out no matter what. Don't come out of the dressing room. Johnny did not want to see me. He goes up and he was furious in the office. McCauley comes to me later and says, my mistake. I shouldn't have let you do that material. It's my mistake.
He knew that you were going to do that.
I was so obsessed. Like how you get as an alcoholic or comic. I was obsessed. And I talked him into letting me do it. Like, I know this will work. I've been doing this in the clubs. It's killing. And I guess that salted him up because he goes, well, at least he's not bugging about the Jesus thing anymore. Right. So, but anyway, he said, you're banned. You're done. You can't do another Tonight Show. Johnny doesn't want to see you. So I get sober. This is like, I don't know, October, November of 84. And so by May 85, I'm sober. About a year later, 86, I've been sober a year. My material's changing. And McCauley sees me in the Improv in LA, and he says, "I'm watching, man. Your whole attitude has changed. You're not as angry. This material you're doing now about the men, this other stuff is fantastic. I want to try to get you back on a Tonight Show."
Wow.
So I go, fantastic. And he says, "But you got to do a Merv Griffin first. It's like, in baseball where they got a rehab assignment, they send you to the minor leagues to make sure you can still pitch okay to the main, you know what I mean? Like a rehab assignment." I go, "A Merv Griffin. That's simple, easy, right? It's simple." So they give me a date for Merv Griffin. A week later, I'm doing Merv Griffin. When I'm backstage at a Merv Griffin, and Les Sinclair, the talent coordinator for Merv Griffin, comes up and he says, "Listen, I got to tell you, the whole audience tonight is from an old Jewish old folks home. It's almost all Jewish people from an old folks home, retirement home." I go, "Why is he telling me this? I'm just doing Merv Griffin material. It's nothing." Okay, whatever, So we go back behind the curtain because I'm going to be the next act. And out on stage is Diane Cannon. You remember her, the actress?
Gorgeous, yeah.
Yeah. So Diane Cannon's sitting there, and Merv goes, "Diane, this is a very serious movie." She goes, "I'm so proud of it. It's one of the best things I've ever done. It's called Jenny's War." And Merv goes, "Let's see a clip." And so on all the monitors, all of a sudden, Diane Cannon is in a concentration camp, and Nazis are beating her up.
Wow.
Leather-clad Gestapo Nazis are beating her up. And she's crying for her daughter, right? She's trying to get her daughter out of it. So I don't know. It's crazy. It's Holocaust material.
Right.
They come out of that clip. Merv goes, "Ooh, that was very powerful. Let's bring out our next entertainer." Vicki, I'm like blonde hair, blue eyed. I might as well have goose stepped out onto the stage. "Here comes the jokes. You will laugh." I bomb. First joke, nothing. I look out. It's like that scene from, you know what I mean? It's like, it's unbelievable.
And what kind of material? What do you even?
It's just simple stuff. I have the tape. I could even show you the tape. It's just the simplest, like growing up stuff. You remember this, remember that, nostalgia comedy, simple, easy stuff. Just that it's not even stuff I'm going to do on Tonight Show, right? But I mean, they're like, right? They're shocked. They're in shock.
Because you do look like you could be in.
Oh my God. It was, I don't even think they're even aware I'm there. They're just all in shock in their own memories. I'm probably, they're probably tattoos glowing on their arms. I mean, it's like, it's, and somebody told me, it might've been Seinfeld, I'm not going to drop names, but if you ever drop a joke, nobody laughs, don't worry about it. Just look at the lead camera, smile and nod as if you got to laugh, and they'll put the laughs in later. I do that at first. I do that for every joke. And I'm sweating like Albert Brooks in broadcast news. My back is soaked. I'm sweating. And every joke I just finish, you go like a moron. I got nothing. 5 minutes. I keep thinking I got to run. I should cut it short. I think I should stop, maybe do crowd work. "Hey folks, anybody here from Warsaw?" Something, right? Just crazy. Get out. But I don't. I just go through the whole set. I just plow through it. Like just
anybody here from Warsaw?
Just grinding it. I get off stage. I come back. Les is there. He goes, "I'm so sorry, man. I tried to get Diane Cannon to switch with you. I knew this was going to be a problem. She wouldn't go second. She had to go first." And I said, "I'm done. I'm toast." And you know what I did? I mean, I called people because I was like looking at that bartender going, if I ever wanted to drink, I was like only about a year or so sober. I was like, and I called up my spiritual mentor. He says, "Go help some people. Go show up. So no matter what," this was like learning that I don't know what's going to happen. This is learning letting go. This is that whole letting go thing. I just, for 3 days, I couldn't sleep. I was angry, man, angry. I go, "Man, I've been doing good things, and this is how I get the payback." I swear, this is the truth. 3 days in, I'm at the Improv. Jim McCauley walks up to me at the Improv. He said, I'm glad to see you here. I heard about the Merv Griffin thing." I'm like going, "Don't worry, you're never going to see me again. I'm getting a U-Haul. I'm moving back to Jersey. I'm done. I know I'm done." He goes, "No, you were very professional. Very professional. They'll fill in the laughs later. Don't worry. You're ready to do Tonight Show again." And he gave me a date. I ended up doing 12 more Tonight Shows after that. He gave me a date. But I had the tape of the Merv show. And this is true. This is true. You see me doing a joke, and they'll do a cutaway of the audience. You hear laughter, but the audience is like this. You're like, who's laughing? Nobody's. You hear the laughter, but you don't see anybody laugh.
So when you go back and you do the Tonight Show, it's now a year plus after the heart attack stuff. You get the nod from Johnny? Do you get to what? How is Johnny with you?
I did panel about after that. It was always like if there's time. I was never one of those guys that was the sure definite.
Right.
I mean, like sometimes it was definite. They say, yeah, you will. And then something happens, you know, you won't. And other times there's no time. Oh, there is time now. You will do it. They'd always let me know right behind the curtain what the chances are. Watch Johnny. He'll give you the signal. You know, this is simple. Come over. One of these just meant, you know, you're okay. Good. See you next time.
So when you got the, are you, okay, so what is the preparation for, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do panel with Johnny?
Oh, you have some sort of story, some sort of thing that he can lead you to. And
do you remember what your first panel with Johnny was?
No, I can't remember. I cannot remember. I have tapes I haven't watched. I just found a bunch of tapes. I got rid of a lot of tapes. You know, 2 divorces. I've had 2 divorces. And so I threw out a lot of stuff. I'd get angry and I just would heave stuff. And if I didn't heave it, the exes would heave it. You know what I mean? There's stuff missing. But over the years, some people have sent me things, and I found some things that other people put up on YouTube that I didn't know about. So those pictures I sent you earlier of me and Johnny on panel, I never saw those before.
No, that I sent you.
You
that
sent
Tony
me.
found.
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. I never.
Right.
So you sent me those a couple weeks ago. Look, I already forgot that.
Tony found them.
You found them. You found them. I never saw those before. So I might have that tape, but I found a bunch of tapes I've had transferred, but I haven't looked at them yet. I can't.
Okay, so forget the first one. Is there anything of the 12 times you were on the Tonight Show? Any panel situations you remember?
I'll tell you something. This is memorable. My dad was so angry that I did not to go become a lawyer. I was supposed to come back, and his friend Craig Bernstein was Bill Bernstein. Excuse me, Bill Bernstein was a prosecutor in town. He wanted me to come into the prosecutor's office, and my friend Basil Beck wanted me to clerk with him. My dad thought I was going to come back and be a lawyer. He was so angry at me. He never talked to me for like 4 years. The first 4 years of my career, never talked to me. Wow. And so the first few Tonight Shows I did, even when I came back sober, he didn't talk to me. One of them, probably about the third time I came back, you know, with Johnny, Don Rickles was a guest on the show. Now, my dad loved Don Rickles. That was his favorite, one of his favorites. I mean, Jackie Gleason in terms of everything, but Don Rickles he loved. He saw Don Rickles a couple times live. The great stories he had about it. So I knew he'd be watching. So they told me the same thing. You know, you may do panel. It depends what happens. Well, Don, of course, went along with him. They told me, you're probably not going to do panel. Look over and see what Johnny gives you a signal. I finished my set. I felt real good about it. I look over at Johnny, gives me what it is. So instead of just turning and going back to the curtain or bowing, you know, Don Rickles always came out like with the bullfighter, right? The bullfighter music, like he was a bullfighter.
Right.
I felt like I was a gunfighter with the audience, right? So instead of just turning around and walking back, I pulled my jacket back behind my hip like I had a gun, and I backed out of a saloon. I'd look like I was backing out of a saloon. I like had my hand on my gun. I was looking at him back into the curtain, and Johnny starts laughing, and Rickles starts laughing, and Ed McMahon goes, "What's he doing?" And Johnny goes, "He's doing a gunfighter. It's great." And the next day, my mom would always call me. My mom would call me, you know, she'd watch it and call me. She called, my dad gets on the phone. He grabs the phone. He goes, "Hey, you made Johnny Carson laugh. You're good at this." And I cannot tell you how much that meant to me. It was a monkey off my back. I remember hearing something when I was growing up. Somebody once said, "You're not a man until your daddy says you're a man."
Oh.
You know what I mean? And that's sort of like my generation or the way I grew up or thinking, you know, I wanted his approval. I don't know if anybody doesn't want their parents' approval. I definitely wanted my dad's approval, you know, and I went through laughter. I'm sure I went to laughter because I wasn't getting it. And laughter is just pure unadulterated approval. That's what laughter is. It's from strangers, doesn't matter. If you're looking for that approval, you don't care where you get it. You want it. And for me, that's what it was, always. And my dad saying that, I mean, that started, I told you, it changed when he got sober, but it changed also for me when he told me that.
I can imagine so. And then I can only imagine that once he did get sober and
Yeah.
did make amends to you, that the quality of the conversation has changed after
Yeah,
that, I would
totally, totally,
imagine.
totally. Always, to the end. I mean, I was there with him at the end. I was there when he was doing that, what they call agonal breathing.
What's that?
He's going,
Oh,
so the hospice nurse told me that because of the morphine they were giving him, he's not unconscious. He's in a deep sleep. So they think that they hear you in a deep sleep. And I remember the night before he died, I was sitting in the hospice with him. It was just me and him, and he's doing that breathing, and I'd go over and sit and talk to him. Now, I was timing his breathing before, and it was like every 5-6 seconds between a breath. I went and talked to him. I noticed his breathing shortened, and I started timing him, and it was every 3 seconds. After I talked to him, there was a change. He was reacting to me in some way. And I would tell him, I said, Dad, I would tell him all the stuff I was grateful for, that we were all grateful for him, and the sense of humor he gave me, and how funny he was to me. And I told him, I said, Dad, you got your money's worth out of this body. You can leave now. You can go, Dad. We're all cool. Everybody's okay. You got your money's worth out of this body. I mean, the last thing he did before he went under, he'd lost a lot of weight. Obviously, you're losing weight. He's losing weight. He lost a lot of weight, and he hadn't eaten anything in a day, and he hadn't anything to drink in a day, maybe 2, whatever. So they're giving him a little bit of something to drink, a little bit of drink. This is the last conscious contact I had with him. And he takes a sip of water, and he goes to me, I can barely hear him. He goes, well, that should put some weight back on me. You just cracked that. I go, that's good, Dad, because we got to bale hay in 2 weeks. Right? And so he smiles. So he gave a joke, and he got a joke.
wow.
The last interaction I had with him. And my dad was always funny. I remember once I broke my foot. This is before I got sober. I broke my foot dancing in a nightclub in Atlanta called the Limelight. I broke my foot. Some guy came down on my foot and broke it, right? He jumped off the speaker and landed on my foot and broke my foot. I was dancing. So I tell my dad, I got a cast on my foot. He goes, what happened to your foot? I said, I was in this club dancing, and some guy came down on my foot. He said, well, dance with women. They're lighter. I go, so,
wow, that's quite a thing, because I was with my father at the end too, and he was
yeah,
unconscious, but
yeah.
I didn't have that moment where I got words. But he did open his eye when I said, Dad, open your eyes. His eyes opened, and
Oh, did he?
the
Wow.
nurse said to me, he can't see you. And that was not, he was unconscious, but he knew, and he opened his eyes, and he
You
knew I
said to
was
open
there.
his eyes. He opened his eyes. That would
That's
be
right.
a
That's
me.
right. Yeah.
I just look. I was talking to him for the whole family. I just had to be
Mm-hmm.
that last day. I was there all but an hour, and when I left that night, I didn't know whether he was going. He was gone like the next morning, but I didn't know that he was going to be gone. But my whole family. There was so much healing by the end. It was all just love. It was all love with my dad and my brothers and my sister and my mom. It was all love. So I mean, I felt good about that.
That's a beautiful thing. And it's beautiful that you got to have all of that, those years with him of
Yeah.
just amazing that you got to have that with him. We're not going to do one of these Diane Cannon. We're not leaving on that. We're not
No,
leaving
no,
on-
we can. That's a good. I mean, I like to me, it's a good story. But I'll do any kind of story you want.
Well,
Anything.
okay, so
Story
we
about you want
heard
a
the
story about some
Roseanne thing.
other people?
Had it Married with Children happen for you?
Well, that's Then here's another thing you might not. So I'd gone to network on the Cheers audition when they went to replace the coach. Remember that?
Yeah.
So they go to replace the coach, and you know what network is? You're down to 3 actors for the role, and they finally bring the network in, and they're going to make decisions. You've auditioned for the producers maybe several times, which I had for the Cheers producers, and they go, "You're going to network now." So there was 3 of us in there. There was myself, Woody Harrelson, who obviously got the role, and a guy named Timothy Threadgill. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but Timothy Threadgill eventually became this guy. Have you ever called it Grizzly Man? You ever see this documentary called Grizzly Man? It's unbelievable. So he goes up to Alaska and thinks he can commune with the bears, right? Because it's summertime, the bears are not that aggressive, but when he stays too long one year, he stays too long. At the end, when they're getting ready to hibernate, they're very aggressive for food, and they eat him and his girlfriend. That's basically the end of that movie. Werner Herzog directed it. It's called Grizzly Man. Anyway, Timothy Threadgill was the third guy. Somebody told me this later, and I checked it out. It was true. Somebody else had realized that because they knew Timothy Threadgill. He was also one of us for a while and decided and become his own higher power. That's what he did up in Alaska. So it was three blondes. It was a West Coast dumb blonde. It was a Midwest dumb blonde, which was Woody, and I was the East Coast dumb blonde. So I didn't get it. But as soon as I saw Woody Harrelson, of course they made the right choice. So the next thing I auditioned for was this Married with Children. There was no network. Fox was not a network yet. And we're auditioning for a show that's going to be on this new network. So again, go through it. We go to network. There's three comics, not comics. There's three actors, three of us sitting in a hallway waiting to audition. In comes Michael Moy, who was a shorter black fellow, and a tall Jewish guy, Ron. I can't think of his name. The other creator. Anyway, Ron. I can't think of his last name now. Anyway, doesn't matter. The creators for Married with Children come in. The actor across from me jumps up. I can see this right now and runs to Michael Moy. Like, hey, buddy, how you doing? Hey, Michael Moy greets. They're friends. They're friends. Michael Moy's like, hey, you're gonna like LA. My wife's got the guest room made up. You got your bag here. Fantastic. The other guy, look at the other guy. He looks like Lee Harvey Oswald after he got shot by Ruby. You know, he's got he's over. He's done. I'm like, F this, man. I'm not sitting around for this. I'm gonna leave. I was, they come out. By the time I figure out I want to leave, Ritch, you're first. I go in. I don't care. I've never gone into an audition like this in my life. I did not care. I didn't think it was possible for me to get it, so I didn't care. So I'm just making fun of the fact there's no network. I'm making fun of everything. I'm making fun. I'm loose. I'm funny. So Ron told me later, because we became friends.
Ron Levitt.
Ron Levitt. Thank you. Ron Levitt. Ron told me later, my wife, Kay, my second wife, Kay, and his wife became friends. Sharon Levitt. They became friends. Ron, one time, this was a couple of years after I got fired like 7 episodes in. I'm like regular character, thinking I'm a regular character. 1 week, I don't get the script, but this is how they fire you in LA. Friday, I'm supposed to get a script. I work with my acting coach over the weekend. Monday is the table read, right? One Friday, I don't get the script. I called my agent, I had to get my script. He goes, probably a delivery problem. I'll call you right back. Calls you back. You're fired. You did your 7 episodes or whatever, 7 of 13. They dropped me. I didn't know why. Nobody ever said a word to me. That's what happened.
Huh.
Kay becomes friends with Sharon. We're going out to the Malibu home all the time to have barbecues and all. Sharon says, Ron, you got to tell him what happened. One day we're out there. She says, you got to tell him now what happened. So Ron and I take a walk on the beach. He said, look, when you stole the role from Michael Moy's friend, he hated that role from then on, and he was constantly trying to get rid of it. And we weren't a hit yet. And I was fighting so many other fires. I just finally said, fine, fire him. Do you want him gone? He's gone. Me, talking about me. So that's what happened. It's okay. I said, it's okay. It's all right. I get it. But that was it, That's how, that's how it happened. So, but that show was on for like 40 years, and every time
but you still had it aired, and was it a hit before you were gone?
It's not a hit until that woman from Ohio called it an obscene show. All they talk about is sex, and everybody in America went, "What channel is that on?" So one of those Christian groups, Morality for TV or whatever she ran. She did a lot of yapping and the publicity about it, and that really helped the show. But it was not a hit. Nobody knew that network was even on. It was like, I think there was a Tracy Ullman show. There was that, I think 21 Jump Street, some other show. I don't know. There were like 4 shows on a Sunday night, and this was one of them.
Wow.
Ed O'Neill was great to work with.
Who was great to work with?
Ed was great.
Oh, really?
And everybody remembers one episode when I was with the Cherry Sisters. There were 2 flight attendants. Ed has a fight with his wife, and I bring him over to my house for the night. Well, I'm setting him up with a flight attendant. One of the Cherry sisters, right, was again, you're gonna have to help me out. She was married to Mick Jagger.
Oh, Jerry Hall.
Jerry Hall. She was married to Mick Jagger at the time. She was the one I was with, and then I voiced the other one on to Ed O'Neill, who of course doesn't do anything with her. He runs home to his wife and gives her a blonde wig to wear, that night.
I remember that episode actually.
So Jerry Hall, right? So Jerry liked to smoke, and I was still smoking cigarettes at the time. So one break, we're outside smoking, taking a break, we're outside smoking. And out of nowhere, she goes, you're a Rolling Stone fan. I go, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I am. She goes, Mick's a cheap bastard. You know that, right? I said, no, I did not know that. But that doesn't change my opinion. I'm just like, so I don't know. She's like, yeah, he's a cheap bastard. Like, okay, bro, okay, that's nice. It's just that it becomes just any other husband and wife thing. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's
rock
crazy.
star, model, they're the same thing. Like you won't let your wife buy a new bowling ball, and Mick won't let her buy a new Maserati. Whatever. I don't know what it is.
Hysterical. And she was married to him at the time.
Yeah, she was married to him just out of nowhere. She was, he's a cheap bastard. No, I didn't, but
That's hysterical.
If I run into him, I'll make sure that he picks up the check.
Wow. And so how about Jeff Foxworthy? How did that relationship happen?
Well, Jeff, man, he was one of those, that movie, Robert Redford, The Natural?
Yeah, sure.
Natural. Foxworthy was that with stand-up. I remember the first time I saw him, they were having a Southeast comedy contest in Atlanta, at the Punchline in Atlanta. So they have me, because I'm coming in to work that week as a headliner, judge the Tuesday night, judge that night, judge it. So, okay, I judged this contest. And it was like James Gregory, who went on a great career. There was a lot of Paul Clay. There was a lot of good comics down there. And Jeff Foxworthy was clearly the best that night. And so I voted in the best that night. So we go up to the bar afterwards, and I walk up to him, and he met his wife, Greg, that night. He might have been talking to her when I walked up to him. They met that night.
Wow.
And I walk up and I go, it's great, man. How long you been doing it? And I thought he was only going like 3 years, 4 years. He goes, yeah, a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks. I said, I felt like quitting right then. Really? He was just a natural. Some people.
Wow.
And his joke, people don't give him credit, but he actually created a form of joke. You might be a redneck if.
Right.
It's so he actually put the punchline before the setup, right? If your working TV is on top of your non-working TV, you might be a redneck. The punchline people is such a simple formula that people, right? It's almost like, and for Jeff, he was a very smart guy. He went to Georgia Tech. He was, and some sort of engineering, but it was almost like a physical theorem thing. If this is true, then that must be true, right? Remember that from if this, therefore that.
Sure.
So he was very good to work with, and so I was working for Roseanne, and I was on the lot, over there, CBS Radford, and I'm walking one day, and Jeff drives by in his car and stops on the lot and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm working for Roseanne." Now this Roseanne show was winding down. It was next to last season or whatever. He says, "Hey, why don't you come write for me on my show?" So I jumped. I jumped from Roseanne to Jeff's show because, frankly, I thought it'd be on longer. It'd have a legs possibility. And so I started working with Jeff, and it was he's a very honorable guy, very funny guy, hardworking. I mean, people think he had those redneck books. They go, "Well, he had those redneck books." What do you mean, just had those redneck books? He couldn't. It's not just they were self-published, really. I mean, some little book in Atlanta book company. He was on the phone. He told me how they would do it. He'd get up at 4 a.m. and start calling radio stations, doing phoners where he'd do some of these redneck jokes on these books. And he'd do one after another. He'd sit there for 4 or 5 hours, and Greg would be giving him coffee and cigarettes, and he'd be just, every day just doing that, just getting those things out. And that's how the books became popular. And then, of course, he started drawing in the clubs, right? And he was just a hardworking comic and a funny guy.
How is that? How was that transition for you? You always did stand up while you were a writer.
Yeah.
When you made that transition from being the guy that they were writing the pilots around
Yeah.
to the person doing the writing, was that a good thing? Was that, did you not like that? Did you like that?
It's a big adjustment to where you're going. I know it's funny. I mean, look, I saw it happen in comics that they would go, that's funny. And they go, no, it's not funny for this character. It's not funny at this moment in the script. It takes it away from the story. You had to be funny on point. It was a lot of lessons to learn there. It's tough for me. It was tough for me. Dynamics. I look, my instinct with groups is tough. I can only handle being on stage with a microphone in front of a group where I have a clear purpose. The structure is pretty set. I'm talking, you're listening. As long as you keep laughing, you'll listen. I was not good in those dynamics of room. I was not. A friend of mine once said, your problem, Ritch, is you look at assholes like they're assholes. Well, you don't have any smoothness that way. I go, yeah, okay, I get it. And those writing rooms are tough. They're tough. The dynamic of sitting in there with a bunch of people, and they'd start doing Broadway tunes and singing and performing, and I'd be like, we're wasting time here. I mean, I got a kid at home, and why am I sitting here till 10 o'clock at night when 2 hours of it is you guys singing Broadway tunes, which I didn't know anything about anyway. So it was a tough dynamic, and everybody has to make those adjustments. And you go from like you're running a show, as a stand-up, you do everything. You write,
Right.
direct, produce. You do your costuming. You do everything.
Right.
And to where you go, you're going to just go do jokes off the script, and then maybe you will eventually let you into the room to pitch story ideas or something like that. You have to work your way up, and it was interesting. One time I was an executive at Foxworthy show. I mean, I can't remember because he did an NBC and ABC that they shifted networks in between shows.
Mm-hmm.
He said to somebody, he goes, that guy, indicating me, he said, that guy's he's got a lone wolf attitude. I mean, you read me right. You're right. I do. I totally get it. Comics, we're all a little bit of loners, in a way. We're like, we work alone. We like working alone. Some comics can only work alone. Some can act and do sketch work and all that sort of thing. But I'm comfortable with myself now. I'm okay. But
you worked on Miind of the Married Man, right?
Yeah.
And was that a tough gig for you?
Well, look, it was a gift. Again, this is the lesson every young comic has learned. Most of the really great gigs I had just came from other comics.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Me coming up, and Mike Binder, very generous, hired me to be his number 2 writer for that show or whatever. And
wow,
a lot of fun coming up with this stuff. A lot of fun. And I think if Mike had really wanted to do TV, but I think Mike wanted to get back into making movies. But if he wanted to do TV, that show could have been on a long time. It could have been a long time. And it was also tough because Mike wanted to do it in film instead of tape, which is a much more expensive process, obviously.
right.
He had a film background, and he was a film director and a writer. So he kind of approached them as like little independent movies instead of episodes.
Right.
Came on the same years as Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. We came on the same year.
I was a huge fan of that show, Miind of the Married Man. I love that show.
I think somebody once told me we were way more expensive than Curb Your Enthusiasm. Way more expensive because things had to be reshot. If they had to be reshot, it was all film. Things had to be. It's much, and so that was a big factor. Mike might have wanted to go back to doing independent features. I mean, I never really. I would have loved to have kept doing it. It was great. It was a great gig. It was a great gig. And
it's interesting because now, after he's made all these big films, huge films, Mike's doing stand-up again.
Yeah, and he's loving it. He's having a blast doing it. And there was a time when he would say, don't talk to me about stand-up. I don't talk about that. There was a time where he kind of pushed that away, but he's come back and embraced it. He loves it. I think when he went back, to do the documentary about the Comedy Store, and he directed that. And I think it brought up a lot of memories for him, and maybe he felt like he had some unfinished business there.
Mm.
When you hit different points in your life, you want to. I want to be more of a writer. He probably just wanted to be more of a performer at that point.
So,
Right?
so where do you sit with that? And I have a second part to this question. You're one of the comics, there aren't a lot that have done Carson, Letterman, Leno. I mean, I would imagine the Carson memories are just the most precious because
Well, for
I
again, for the dad approval, because of my generation and who Carson was, really more for his dad. I had a lot of fun doing Letterman. He was closer in age, obviously.
Mhm.
And Leno was someone I hung out with in LA when I first got out there. Jay was very kind to me, like Jay was a one man welcoming committee for every young comic coming out there.
Wow.
I mean, and Jay, I remember the first time I had a Heinrich Garrick motorcycle jacket, and I still had my motorcycle license from the East Coast. And Leno said, "Hey, Shiny, you just wear the jacket or you actually ride?" I said, "Yeah, I ride." He said, "Come on up to the house. I'll give you one of my bikes and we'll go out, motorcycle riding." And I had a 62 Chevy convertible, which I just bought in LA. I hadn't done anything to fix it up yet. So I pull up, Jay's working on the car. He's got his head, he's under the hood of a car. And I pull up the driveway and I turn off my car. Jay pops out from underneath the hood. He goes, Shiner, turn it back on again. I turn my car back on. Yeah, it's running rough. Bring it up here. Let's tune it up. Let's tune it up. I never tuned up a car in my life. He changes the oil, tunes up my car. That's who he is.
Mm-hmm.
I remember once he got a new Harley Davidson motorcycle from Harley. Remember the one he rode on Letterman? He rode it out on Letterman, and they gave it to him, shipped it back. It had the stereo and the fairing, which is a new thing, right? So it could play music, cassette tapes. So I make him a cassette tape with all kinds of what I think are good hard rocking, good riding music, right? And so we're taking a ride up to someplace, we're taking a ride. So we ride up to the canyon. And first time we stop, he flips me the tape. I don't want to hear that shit, man. I just want to hear the motorcycle. He didn't want to hear that music. He just wanted to hear the motorcycle engine.
That's so funny.
That's truly who he is. There's nothing fake about the guy.
So I loved Bill Maher's True Story, and I know that you wrote a film version of that. Are you one of the comics that are you shit or whatever?
Yeah, a little bit, no, a little bit, probably amalgam of somebody. He had some of the weird amalgams,
Mm-hmm.
But there are other comics who I know who those characters were.
I know one or two, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look, I think I did a good job with the script. I think the main thing was there were 3 storylines, if I remember correctly, in the 3 main ones, and a lot of different characters, and a lot of side characters and all. It's just too much. That was the problem that I read the other scripts before. You got to narrow it down. Like the best Stephen King movies are his short stories, not his novels. Novels are too much to try to do all. But
right.
The short stories, they make good movies.
Carrie was a short story,
that's
actually.
Right. And that's right. That's right. It's Shawshank. So that's what I try to do. I did the one storyline, the main character, and then anything that fed to that storyline. And of course, the Michael Hampton Caine was the other, his sort of antagonist, the guy who wanted to form a union. So the problem was Showtime came out with I'm Dying Up Here, which is kind of like the same era. So I think Bill kind of lost interest in it. I don't know. Never really talked to him about it anymore, but it's nothing he's doing now. But I had a lot of fun doing that. I mean, I like to write. I love to write. I mean, I do.
So where are you now? So you're in North Carolina. You're in South Carolina.
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Asheville,
you're in
North
Asheville.
Carolina.
And so, yeah, you're in that swing state. You got
We're going to try. We're going down we're going to call up people. If I say anybody needs a ride to get registered, my wife and I are volunteering for those sort of things. The last election I was in Florida. So I volunteered to call up people, cold call people. They gave me numbers. They weren't necessarily Democrats. I'm calling people up during dinner. I said, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again. But driving people to get registered or helping out in any way I can, calling and reminding people who are registered Democrats to vote, then I'll do. I just don't want to bug anybody who's not already registered Democrat.
I think that's wonderful. And as far as you go, Ritch, where does your ambition lie now? What if
Ambition.
in a perfect world, what would you like the next
I tell you
phase to
my
be?
ambition is I want to have a published book, novel, all right, and a produced screenplay. If I have any kind of things left, it's just to deal with writing. I have a show about the history of stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see that produced, even if it's somebody else hosting it instead of me. I do the show now, but I could see them getting a name doing it. And I would love to be just sort of like the Shelby Foote. Remember Ken Burns' Civil War documentary? Mm-hmm. Shelby Foote was a Mississippi professor who just sat at the side, and every once in a while they go to him and he tells some pithy story. I would love to be that character on this stand-up history show. I think there's a documentary there. I'm shocked that nobody's done it yet. I'm shocked that Ken Burns hasn't done. They did a series about jazz, a documentary about jazz music. Now, God bless jazz music, but there are 15 fans left in America. There are 15 million comics in every city, right? And nobody's done a documentary about, and it's an original American art form. It's just the same as jazz. It's an original American art form. Stand-up comedy started, the first stand-up comic was an American. Artemis Ford back in the Civil War. So I would love to see something happen about that. But I don't have any personal ambitions of, I talked to a friend of mine. He goes, I want to go on America's Got Talent. I said, why? He said, well, I could get into the nightclubs. He's my age, get into nightclubs and maybe, be a draw or something. I go, first of all those kind of contests, you have to worry about the results and you're competing with other entertainers. And to me, once I got away from, only thing I ever should look for when I went on stage was laughter. If you're going on stage for anything other than laughter, you're setting yourself up for bitterness and disappointment. Of course, people got more. People, but all the kingdoms at our age are pretty much settled. You know what I mean? You're not going to take over Mount Seinfeld. You're not going to take over Mount Carey. Those places are settled, right? Those kingdoms are set. You're not going to be the next Rodney Dangerfield. The odds are, Lewis Black was our generation's Rodney Dangerfield, right? Late blooming, attracted a younger generation. That's done too. I don't care about that stuff. If I go on stage and make people laugh, sometimes fine. But there are certain things I'd like to see done. I'd like to be part of a documentary on the history of stand-up comedy. I mean, I've written everything and I've got all the stories, and name a character, name a comic, and I probably got a story about them. And I know that, and I have takes on it. I have insights into it, and I've done a lot of work on it.
Okay, so before we go, we lost one in the fairly recent past. Well, we lost Hiram really recently. But somebody that more people know about, we lost Richard Lewis. You have a Richard Lewis story for us?
I don't have it. It's so funny you say that. I don't necessarily have a Richard Lewis story.
All right. Well, give us a story on some. You said you've got a story on pretty much every comedian. So you pick one. And leave us with a story.
Give me another one. Give me another besides Richard Lewis.
Okay. How about Robert Klein?
Robert Klein. I loved Robert Klein. First time I saw Robert Klein, 1973, American University in DC. I laughed so hard I nearly fell out of the bleachers. It was unbelievable. He was so funny. Monster act. I respect him all those years. So I got in a fist fight in 1981 on stage. On stage, got in a fist fight.
What?
Yeah, a club called Wits End. I didn't know it, but the club, the guys who were previous owners of the club wanted to get the club back. And they wanted to disrupt the business of the club that was going on. They wanted to turn it back into a bar that they had. So they sent these guys to disrupt the show. I didn't know this. The guys didn't know this. Nobody knew this. So we ended up having a fist fight on stage, right? And I took control of it, and we were tagging each other pretty good. And then the bouncer finally takes the guy off stage. Now I got my shirts ripped. I did pretty well with him, but I'm obviously been in a fight. I turn to the audience after they take him off. I go, all right, folks. And I start doing my act again. And they're like, no, 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 you're a maniac. We'll give you that. And you put on a good show, but no more comedy. I didn't tell anybody about this. I was embarrassed to tell anybody because I really lost my cool. Right. I tried being witty, tried being funny, and eventually they came for me, and I just dropped any kind of pretense of trying to be funny and just bar fight on stage. I didn't tell anybody for years. So I'm working with Robert Klein in Atlanta. He's coming in the headline. They asked me if I'd open for him. I'd been there a week before. I said, I jumped at it. I said, I'd do anything with Robert Klein. So I'm opening for him. So we're talking, we're, changing stories. He says, what's your worst time on stage ever? I said, oh, hell with it. I tell him that story. He laughs. He goes, I did the same thing. He said, I was in a bowling alley in Brooklyn, and I got into a fist fight with a guy, and then I turned to the audience and tried to do comedy again. The same thing, and they did the same thing. No, no, no. I go, God, I bonded with Robert Klein over a fist fight on stage. Who'd have ever thought?
That's crazy. I mean, just the thought of Robert Klein being in a fist, he's a Jew boy. I mean, just the thought of him being in a fist fight is crazy.
I totally believed it because I always thought he was kind of physical in a way. He was not a small guy. And, he came from a tough area, I mean, he was obviously, I've read his book, so I know some of his stories.
Me too.
He was almost, mugged badly. And he was, a guy who'd been around some roughness. And he's not like a guy that never threw a punch. I could see that with Klein. I could totally see it. He had some anger in him too. And so as witty as he was, as funny as he was, when he said that he got a fist fight too, I was like, oh man, this is the best.
I love it. I love it. Oh my God. Okay, well, that's a good place to go. Ritch, thank you so much for doing this again. And it's always wonderful to spend time with you. And I've so enjoyed it. And
thank you.
I hope that we get to see you in the real world sometime.
I hope to be out there soon. Ron and I are definitely going to come out there.
Well, I look forward to it. And thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sending lots of love.